Hi Michelle, here's the feedback for the reading part of the mock exam that you've done recently. You started off well, you've got 4 marks, so you've got the full score for the first question. So if we look at question 2 now. So this is the question where you've been asked to analyse the writer's use of language to describe the effect of the storm. And your very first paragraph says that every sentence starts with he, so it suggests it's all about him and could suggest he puts himself forward and not others. No mention of the storm, so this bit here isn't really relevant. You've gone on to mention the complex sentence, but you've said that it could insinuate that it went on and on. I'm assuming that you mean the storm, but you've not made it clear. So again, it could be classed as being irrelevant there. So down here now, finally, we get on to looking at some of the words used to describe the storm. So you've come up with some adjectives. Just be careful because some of these words that you've classed as adjectives aren't. So lashing and pushed are verbs, and tangled is a verb as well, so you just need to make sure that you're getting the terminology right. You've said that they've been used to describe the severity of the storm and the nightmare effect. I think it would have been more effective had you described the effect of the individual words. So for example, the lashing gives the effect that the trees are being hit by the wind. Furious suggests that the waves are angry and that they're pounding. They're trying to take out their anger on the land itself rather than just giving a sweeping statement that is describing the severity of the storms. And then you've gone on to mention that the writer wants us to know how scared he was by mentioning waiting for the pounding in his chest to die down. Again, this isn't really telling us about the effect of the language used to describe the storm. So looking at the mark scheme, if we look at level 1, offers simple comments on the effect of the language. Well, I think really it is only simple comment. As I said, if you'd have described the effects of these words individually, you would have gained higher marks for that, but because you've lumped them all together and just said it's describing the severity of the storm, it's showing that it's only a simple comment rather than even an attempt to comment on the effect of the language in band 2 there. Select simple references or textual details. Well, I think for that one we can go up to level 2 and say you have selected some appropriate textual detail. And then he makes simple use of subject terminology, not always appropriately. I agree that it's not always been used appropriately, but if we look at the level 2, it says make some use of subject terminology, mainly appropriately. Well, I think a lot of what you said, the terminology is appropriate. You talked about the complex sentence and the conjunction. And then some of these are adjectives, but not all of them. So I think we can put that one in level 2. But because your comments on the language are a bit basic, then it will be 3 out of the possible 8 marks for that question. Moving on to question 3, where you're asked to look at how the text is structured to interest you as a reader. You could write about what the writer focuses your attention on at the beginning, how and why the writer changes the focus as the source develops, and any other structural features that interest you. I like the way you've started it off with the writer focuses on Alex and his nightmare, and you've gone on to say that it could actually be his life portrayed into a nightmare, and his mother being taken into the sky could mean her going to heaven. These are some quite perceptive comments. However, the fact that you've not started off with, in the beginning, the writer focuses on Alex, means that there's no mention of structure anywhere in this first page. So unfortunately, none of this is actually relevant to the question, as far as I can see. The first mention of structure comes in here on your second page, where you said the shortest paragraph. is only 2 lines long. So you've made some good comments there, that it's straight to the point, nothing more to add, it's blunt and direct. Here again we've got a little bit of mention of structure. It starts as a nightmare and only gets worse. And his anger, and then you've said, but at the end, a change of heart and appreciation of all the things his mother actually did. And then you've given a quote here listing some of the things that she did when she was alive. And this bit here is a question to answer. It's talking about the language, so that's not relevant to this question. So looking at the mark scheme for this question, if we look at level 1, excuse me, offers simple comment on the effect of structure. You've not really commented on the effect of the structure and how it affects you or interests you, the reader. And you've said that the shortest paragraph, it's only 2 lines long, it's straight to the point and nothing more, but what does that make you, the reader, feel? How does it make it interesting to you? And then the fact that it starts as a nightmare and only gets worse, and then the change at the end. How is this affecting you? How does it make it more interesting for you? I think for you, you've forgotten to use your who, where, how, when, what, why, and so on, because you've not said that we meet Alex in the first part, and then in the second half we get to meet the rest of his family and see how he interacts with them. You could have said that the very first line of the text explains that Alex is waking in his bed at dawn, startled by a nightmare. So straight away we've got the person, the place and the time established, and then it narrows down into the dream where the bird carries off his mother. And you could then have said that this could be the metaphor for the fact that his mum's going to die. He's worried that his mum's going to die. And then the sentence that there's been a lot of days like this since his mother was sick is important, because that's the first mention that his mum is ill, and reminds us of the nightmare at the beginning. And it's at this point that we understand what's going on in the story, and that Alex is frightened that he's going to lose his mum. So unfortunately, because of the lack of mention of structure and how the structure that you've talked about makes you feel, it's limited to the level 1, so it's 2 out of the possible 8 marks for this question. As I say, had you included just the simple words in the beginning at the start of it, then that would have linked into structure, so you would have gained more marks for that first page, but never mind. So looking at question 4, which is the 20-mark question, where you're asked to say what extent you agree with the statement made by the student. You started off saying that you strongly agree with the student, and that you feel that Alex sees his life as a nightmare which he's living every day. He doesn't want to talk about it, so you've given a little quote here from Nicole and responded, or said that Alex replied with "shut up." Here you've said that Alex is obviously struggling if he can't even thank his father for trying, so it would suggest that he would normally be grateful, or at least make sure his father believed he was grateful. So there you've talked a little bit about that Alex is struggling, that you believe he is struggling, but apart from the first mention of it and there, you've not really shown that you do believe that he's struggling, and you've not shown how, or you've not said how the writer has shown us that he's struggling. You could have suggested that the writer shows that he's not coping when he snaps at his sisters, and the dialogue with the conversation where he is shouting at them shows that, or the fact that he's angry with everybody, including his sisters, his father and even his mother for getting ill. That's another way that the writer shows that he's not coping, or comparing the comparison between his mum and all the things that he misses from before she was ill to what she's like now, just a ghost. And you could also mention the paintings, So if we look at the mark scheme, We've got simple limited evaluative comments on the reader, and limited understanding of the writer's method. Well, that's the bit that you've not really done at all. You have included some quotes, although I think you started running out of time for this one. And again, you've made simple limited response to the focus of the statement. As I said, you've only mentioned it twice where you've related it to the question. So I think it's got to be 3 out of the possible 20 for this question, which gives you an overall score of 12 out of 40 for the reading part of this mock exam. We have got time to go through and look at how you can improve on them. I'm still confident that you stand every chance of getting a good score in your GCSE exam, so keep up the good work, keep attending, doing your homework, attending the booster classes, and we will get there.